こんにちは、I'm Japanese YouTuber Mabu Nakagawa. Hello, welcome back to YouTube. So what happened to the Soviet Union in 1980s? The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 after the series of an unexpected event that weakened the power and control of the centralized government over the nation and its satellite states. We come up with some root causes of why this happened in terms of economic stagnation, political turmoil, nationalism, and external pressure. But the thing is that India and other countries like China, North Korea, for example, had a big impact on various fields. Especially North Korea was taking a backup from the Soviet Union when having a conflict with South Korea around the 1960s. The corruption in the Soviet Union began to decline from the middle of the 1980s, reached its lowest growth rate, but later it seemed to be back to normal. But do you think this is real? This is so true? No, really. Seems to be substantially different from the information that later published by the Russian mass media. Some of the major factors that contributed to the collapse seemed to be quite unclear, but I suppose at the moment in the late 1980s, the Soviet Union must have been largely unproductive, which led to a decline in living standard, and also the Soviet government was heavily centralized nation, resulting in limited political freedom and widespread censorship. So people got so unsatisfied with the government at the moment. The Soviet Union was engaged in the prolonged Cold War with the United States, so they didn't have a stamina, making it difficult to keep up with the demand of the people. I think that's how Soviet Union collapsed. Then India lost the biggest partnership with the Soviet Union. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, China was in a period of unstable economy and policies, especially military support mattered a lot at the moment. India had a significant decline in its diplomatic relation with other countries. How could India survive in a world competition then? India had to work on establishing a diplomatic tie with the alternative companies. That's called Look East policy. Look East policy that was initiated in 1990s had its objectives to strengthen tie with Asian countries. India had to look into another way to cultivate extensive economic and political relations with Southeast Asia in particular, because they needed to counter the power influence of China. At the moment, India was still in trouble with China for the intercontinental border around Tibet. Among Asian countries, especially Japan was the perfect counterpart to implement India's economic reforms. India invested heavily in business sector in Japan to grow Indian community, and it did work a lot, fortunately. Overall, sarcastically, the loss of Soviet Union was a turning point for India to transform its diplomatic, economic, and political landscape at the same time. Simply, I would rather say Japan is awesome. East Great Folks, that's a company I'm trying to establish in the near future. But anyway, Look East policy could save India to increase the volume of trade, investment, and connectivity with regions in parallel, and has been largely successful in promoting regional integration and enhancing India's influence and engagement with East Asia. Between 1950 to 1980s, India was still a poor developing country because policy, regulation, and private sectors were severely cracked down by the government. India couldn't do any business freely with external partners because diplomacy was not good. Capitalism was not really encouraged in India by maximizing international business at the moment, but in 1991, India was reborn. 1990s was the historic decade in India. What happened? Why? The Gulf War would have had a big impact on India's community. Well, Gulf War broke out after the Iraq violated the international law in 1991, and the price of oil dramatically went up. As told you in the first half of the video, India wanted the cheap oil from the Soviet Union so badly, right? But after the Soviet Union was gone, Iraq was one of India's largest export markets. So India wanted to avoid any international conflict at the moment. India sent a lot of experience to Iraq and Kuwait, but when the Gulf War broke out, the Indian government carried out an evacuation operation right away to bring them back home. The US government and some Middle East Asian countries sent troops and equipment to Saudi Arabia to protect from invasion of Kuwait, and afterwards, the war ended within 1 year. Well, 1990s was a decade when overall Asian countries made a big progress in economy. India grew up, China grew up, but only Japan had a significant decline after asset price bubble in 1990s. So you see how the global economy was shifting in 1990s. Yeah, Japan used to be a global leader from 1950 to 1980 after the World War II. But now we are having a chronic population decline. Its aging population, tax increase by 10%, and more negative events coming out. Yeah, you see the endless life goes on. For India, on the contrary, it was a big chance to own nuclear power in 1990s. India conducted a first nuclear test called Smiling Buddha and exported 3 types of nuclear devices underground in 1974. Although India claimed its nuclear test was for peaceful purpose, the US and other nuclear holders were not happy for that, of course. They imposed a few tough and strict sanctions on India, but India has refused to sign the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and NPT. Like I told you in the first video, that stands for Non-Proliferation Treaty. So India was thinking it's unfair that only permanent councils are allowed to hold nuclear power, and non-permanent councils are not allowed it. You know what I'm saying? India is non-permanent council, and complains this is not a real peaceful treaty. Do you guys realize this might have been something in common with Russia? Even though Russia violated the international law as they did, they invaded Ukraine and tried to gain its territory and to eastern Ukraine, because Russia doesn't want to surrender at all cost. Both these countries ignore further sanctions on whatever condemnation. They don't care. They do what they believe for their specific purpose. Well, Russia is one of the permanent council, but violates international law, and it may sound more dangerous than India because Russia and Ukraine already had too many war dead. So that's absolutely sad, and that should be unforgivable. But India had no casualties at the moment, so it was barely okay. Please don't blame me on that if I was wrong, because I'm telling you my personal opinion as a third party. I don't exaggerate, I'm right, but I'm talking about the fact on how India was trying to slip through the crackdown of the nuclear weapons, and how US is trying to make the use of it. In 2000, the US started negotiating to sell its nuclear power plant in India instead of holding nuclear weapons, because the US expected to make more money from nuclear power supply. Then the US and India signed an exceptional nuclear cooperation agreement in 2005. This means the world approved India could own its nuclear power. Of course, it doesn't mean India can abuse it. Yeah, it's strictly regulated and monitored by the US and the other developed nations. But it was a huge progress for India to supply atomic energies to overall business sectors in domestic economic growth. It looks a pretty good deal for the US and India. However, there is a big pitfall behind the deal. You know what that means? Let me give you a clue here. So what happened is that originally India is a quite unique country where I don't even fully understand. Based on the fact that India has a large population with a wide variety of cultures, religious diversity, and also has faced many challenges with poverty, corruption, and inequality. We don't always have a right answer to identify which one is good or bad. Because India has too many people, and some people are rich, others are poor, some areas are safe, others are dangerous. All things considered, I think India doesn't have enough insurance coverage for a nuclear disaster. As of now, India seems to have an insurance pool that provides coverage for the nuclear liability. That also provides for compensation to victims of a nuclear accident. However, whether or not India has an adequate insurance pool is a matter of debate among experts. So India is not still sure that potential damage can be calculated when arising from a large-scale nuclear disaster. So what India was asking United States to do is the US is expected to pay for compensation in case the nuclear incident happens. What? Are you serious? Yes, I am. Of course, the US hesitated the ongoing negotiation to finalize the deal because the US knows much of Fukushima nuclear plant lawsuit that raised like 10 or 12 years ago. So remember 10 years ago, we had a big tsunami earthquake and exploded a nuclear plant in Fukushima prefecture, right? The Tokyo District Court ordered the former executive of Tokyo Electric Power Holdings to pay compensation at 95 billion US dollar. So compensation for nuclear damage was a huge risk for the United States. Since this is a huge barrier between the United States and India, the US had no choice but to stay away from it. And guess who raised their hand to support India? Russia. That's why I said India is something in common with Russia. Yeah, because historically Russia and India has a strong partnership with the military forces and the natural resources. Yeah, they used to help each other. The Soviet Union used to export oil to India, and India's economy was grown up in exchange for money, of course. And in the meantime, India got approved to hold nuclear power from the United States. India, likewise, well-balanced relations with those countries when the help was needed. So the only headache for India was China. In 2010s, China made a bigger progress than India did. Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, Xiaomi, Huawei, and many more tech companies in China grew up so fast, right? Both in India and China were developing a tech industry for decades, but they have been in Tibet border conflict mainly for the same period of time. And they still have a complicated trading relationship influenced by geopolitical and economic factors, but they have entered a joint venture to leverage each other's strength and expand their business opportunities. I guess India will also continue to strengthen ties with Russia in part to offset China's dramatic economic growth by taking advantage of Russia's international isolation. So, India uses China's strength when Russia can't help. Likewise, when China can't help, India uses Russia's strength. So, and when India can't get the help of both Russia and China, India asks the United States for extra help. Like I said, they help to use each other at a convenience. As time goes by in 2020s, among these countries, China started to launch One Belt, One Road initiative in 2013. This big project was aimed to connect Asia to Asia, Europe, Africa, and back to India through a network of trade routes. That's also known for Silk Road and the Maritime Silk Road. The belt literally means ancient overland trading route connecting China into Europe. And the other one, road, means a new sea trade infrastructure connecting Africa, India, Southeast Asia into China. So it's just like a one circle connecting all the nations as one. So China intended to strengthen economic ties, mainly among participating countries to promote regional development and to facilitate trade infrastructure. But it's a said and done. This ambition plans for economic integration on a massive scale is considered as China is using to gain geopolitical influence. There has been a criticism and a controversy over concerns about the large amount of debt, sustainability, environmental impact, and India has a long weary of China's growing influence. Many countries taking part in One Belt One Road initiative, including EU, opted not to sign a trade statement, saying that the initiative was not clear on public procurement and environmental standards. One country, Russia, is on board, and China is relying on Russia's cooperation and involvement because of its strong historical connection in business. India will probably get involved with their influence as well, but India is still on guard for China's powerful influence because India doesn't like it. So, big nations like China, India, Russia, European countries are having a complicated interactions with extensive engagements. India is a trade partner with China. Russia is exporting weapons to China. EU is now excluding Russia. China is fighting the US, blah 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 blah. There's so many things are going on between countries. Among them, however, India is going to be leading to economic growth on a global stage. In 2047, India will have the 100th anniversary after the independence. In the next 25 years, India is going to be one of the biggest developed nations for sure. The world will witness a transformation in various sectors like education, industry, health, infrastructure, technology, and many more. India makes a big resolution to make it within 25 years. How will the country and its economy have to perform to achieve this goal by 2047? I think India is likely to continue grow and is grown by young women and will be the major player in the tech industry. Well, already, but life expectancy has to be increased faster than it did in the last 25 years. I can't wait to see how India is going to grow and how India, as we know, will cease to exist. Let me hear your opinion if you have any. Thanks for watching.